I guess I'll start. Well, welcome, California, to the first meeting of the Public Input Design Committee. And we will start with the roll. If Director Hernandez would take care of that, please.
Yes, thank you, and good evening. Commissioner Ahmad?
Here.
There you are. Commissioner Kutagawa? Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Fernandez?
Here.
Commissioner Fornashari?
Here.
And Commissioner Sinai?
Here.
And Commissioner Turner.
Is here.
And Commissioner Turner. I'm sorry, Commissioner Turner.
No worries.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can go.
Okay.
Before we begin, though I can't speak for all my fellow commissioners and staff, I did want to say, and I'm confident that they would agree with me, that we stand with our Asian Pacific Islander communities and condemn the ongoing violence towards Asian Americans. Please condemn. Please know that we see you and want to hear from your communities, and we really want to stop the hate. With that, let me move us kind of, before we start, do we want to take public comments before we even get going, or do we want to just get going? All right, let's just public comments.
Okay. Good evening. In order to maximize transparency and public participation in our process, the commissioners will be taking public comment by phone. To call in, dial the telephone number provided on the live stream feed. It is 877-853-5247. When prompted, enter the meeting ID number provided on the live stream feed. It is 957-7301-9037. When prompted to enter a participant ID, simply press the pound key. Once you have dialed in, you will be placed in a queue. To indicate you wish to comment, please press star 9. This will raise your hand for the moderator. When it is your turn to speak, you will hear a message that says the host would like you to talk and to press star 6 to speak. If you would like to give your name, please state and spell it for the record. You are not required to provide your name to give public comment. Please make sure to mute your computer or live stream audio to prevent any feedback or distortion during your call. Once you are waiting in the queue, be alert for when it is your turn to speak, and again, please turn down the live stream volume. And the queue does not have anybody at this time.
We'll give it a couple minutes for the live stream to catch up.
And just a reminder to all, I have never facilitated the meetings. I'm so used to just following along that I apologize for being a deer in the headlights when we said action.
And there is someone in the queue.
Put them in?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm working on it, sorry. And the floor is yours.
Hello, this is Renee Westolusk calling in. I just have several questions because I couldn't glean from the agenda for tonight what actually was going to be discussed regarding input meetings. Is the timeline for the public input meetings going to be discussed tonight? That's one question I have. and the others are the November through December line drawing. Those are public input meetings. Will there be line drawing sessions in each outreach region, or will they be sporadically done throughout the state? And I guess, I don't know if this will be covered under your policy. A third question is, if members of the public miss their COI public input meeting in their area on their scheduled date, can they give public input at other COI hearings outside their COI area? And then I have another question. Will the COI and line drawing meetings all be live streamed throughout the state so any member of the public can view them from wherever they live? And I had security questions regarding check-in to the virtual COI hearings or possibly the virtual line drawing meetings. Are you going to have some kind of check-in system to make sure persons giving public input are actually residents of California and live in the COI or district they say they are from? And that also applies to verification of written testimony that might be sent in to from different COIs and districts. Is there a way to verify that you're actually getting a letter from someone who actually lives there? Thank you. These are my questions. I don't know if any will be answered at this meeting.
Thank you for all those questions. I really feel that you're actually providing us food for thought, because we are moving forward, and I could see that all my fellow commissioners were quickly jotting down all your questions because they're all really good questions. They won't necessarily be answered today. Today we will be focusing on making sure we're all on the same page on the why, and kind of and just really figuring out that piece before we figure out the how we're going to do everything. And part of the reason we can't jump into how is we don't have our full team yet. Once the contract is signed and all with the line drawer, then we can start co-designing in that fashion as well. But we can answer the question regarding the COI tool. People do not have to give us their information if they don't want to. For all, if I'm right, Marion, it's for any input people give. They don't need to give us their name and their where they live. And
anyone can provide input, and they can be asked to provide their name, but they can't be required to.
Right. And we've made sure that we've created things so that a bot can't send us a whole bunch of them. And then the other piece that I think we can answer now is depending on the design, but last commission, and I'm guessing will probably be the same because we'd like to be as inclusive as possible. You could come and talk about any community. It didn't matter where we were. But that will be something that we will be discussing as we move forward. Yes, Jane?
Thank you. Actually, it depends on time frame on that last one in terms of when the actual line drawing process goes on. We will be a little bit more. We're working on this area right now, and please only give us information about these areas. But you do not have to wait for public input meetings to give us your COI information. You can do that right now. Everyone can do that right now. Yes, we'll be getting more information out about the quality, what we're really looking for, but don't wait until public input sessions that we put on. That's the whole purpose of trying to get this COI tool out there right now, is to get the people involved now. And please, please, please do not wait until the census data is here. That's almost too late. I mean, not really, but there's so much time before that. Please take advantage of it.
Thanks, Jane. Marion?
One other answer to her question about that there would be public or not. All of the meetings of the commission will be public. The exact format depends on whether or not the governor's COVID executive orders remain in effect or not. Those preclude having an actual presence, but they will still be broadcast. And if the COVID orders are lifted, then there may actually be a real live meeting, but it would still be broadcast.
Thank you. Is there any other callers?
No, Chair, there's no other callers.
Alicia?
Just quickly, Christian, Commissioner Kitagawa did not get the link for our meeting, so can you please send that to her as soon as possible? Thank you.
Yes, I can. No problem.
Thank you.
Great. So just to, to answer some of the questions, the purpose for today's meeting, the proposed purpose, is really to explore design and the purpose for the subcommittee, or as I like to call it, a working group, because the idea is that we will roll up our sleeves and work, is to explore, design, and oversee implementation of how the public will submit their input to the commission, with an eye on legal requirements, accessibility, and transparency. Does that sound like what we all agreed to sign up for? Okay. And then for today, we're hoping to clarify the why and the what of the subcommittee's roles. And we will discuss that how, as I said, at a later meeting. We'll focus right now just on the first two. I want to share a quote that I really that got me thinking as we were creating this. Yes, and Alicia is smirking at me. If what if is about imagining and how is about doing, the initial why stage has to do with seeing and understanding. To answer why, to be creative, it is critical that we step back from doing and knowing. And that's from Warren Berger's A More Beautiful Question. One of the things I have learned in my professional career is that it's more important to ask questions than to know the answers many times. With that, I'm going to pass it over to my co-facilitator, Neil.
Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, today we're going to work on the why and what of our role, and the why and what of what we're all doing here. But we are going to start with the how, and the how is how do we want to run these meetings. As you can see, Patricia and I are co-facilitating this meeting, and we just wanted to have a bit of a brief conversation about how we all wanted to do it. We want to take a more of a facilitative approach than the more formal chair approach that we have in our regular meetings, because it is a working group, and the intent is to be a little more hands-on in problem solving here. But the options are: do we want to do Robert's rules? Do we want to have a chair or a facilitator? Do we want to rotate that role? Right now we have just speaker notes. I guess my preference would be to set up a little more detailed agenda so we all know what we're going to do, but we're kind of finishing this up today, and I apologize on my behalf. I feel more comfortable with an agenda that we all have and we're all on the same page of what we're going to talk about. But anyway, so I want to throw that out there, those topics out to start and see what y'all think. Commissioner Isra, sorry. We're trying to be a little less formal too, if that's okay. Not be less formal.
Yeah,
but.
No, whatever, you can call me whatever. Thank you for leading this effort right now. I personally do feel like we need a designated chair or leader person because we need someone who we can turn to who would then be able to communicate any and all information either to staff or to other commissioners. There are, Bagley-Keene rules that we do need to abide by. And I feel quite strongly about some of the more traditional formatting of these types of meetings because of the regulations that we are under. So we can call ourselves facilitators, whatever name we need to, but I do think there should be clear delineation of roles in that leadership position.
Alicia? Yeah, Alicia?
Sorry, I'm pressing too many buttons. Like a lot going on. I agree with Isra, but I also am fine with both you and Patricia taking the lead, because I have many other things I'm working on right now, and to have one more thing on top of my plate right now may not be the best thing for me. And because it does deal with public input and the outreach, I'm fine with both of you taking that on, or whatever the majority wants to do is fine as well.
Okay. I mean, we could switch back and forth. This is going to go on for a little while, but it's certainly not going to go on for the entire duration of our job. Jane?
Yeah, I also agree with both Isra and Alicia in that we need to have someone who's running this, and I also like the idea of rotating because that's always fairly convenient, but certainly until it's and looks like it would be time to have someone from another group be leading it, I don't see any reason why it would not be the two of you for the near foreseeable future, quite frankly. I mean, unless, if it comes up that, it would make perfect sense that someone from the data management was actually running this next meeting, certainly, then, for the next meeting, the rotating, kind of how we do the rotating chair, the rotating facilitator will be, Commissioner Turner, Commissioner Mott, something like that, certainly. But I don't see this going forward for the next several meetings. But again, that depends on how this all evolves. But you guys have all that much better in your head than I believe any of the rest of us. So I certainly am not thinking, I'm going to be running any of this. Now, also, so since I am kind of the chair now for a little bit longer of the full commission, if you want me to pick on names so you guys can organize things, I mean, I'll be happy to do that. But I don't believe that's needed. But
I think we're okay. But I appreciate that, and thank you. Trina, did you have some thoughts?
I'm interested to just move on. I'm in agreement. I'm fully engaged, and yes, I think I'm in support of what Isra has lifted up, and I'm comfortable with you and Patricia taking the lead.
Okay, we will definitely do that, and then I will we'll definitely work to get an agenda put together and out to everybody ahead of time. And of course, we'll be working, tracking kind of meeting minutes, well, not minutes, but a summary of the meeting. We'll put together a summary of the meeting after the meeting, get that out to everybody with tasks and follow-up action items. Let's see, the kind of one other question that we had here was around budget that we were thinking of, and it's do we design and then create a budget based on our design, or do we have a budget and then we design? I think it's going to have to be the latter. I mean, I in some ways ideally it would be the former, but I think it's going to have to be the latter at this point in time, based on the fact that our budget request needs to be in a few days. So I just kind of want to throw that out there in case anybody had any other kind of thoughts or ideas on the approach that we take.
Yeah, I think it, oh, sorry. And
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Trina, and then Alicia.
yeah, I think it's counterintuitive for the way that you suggested. I understand the why, but I think we should move into actually creating it and just see where after we create it, we may need to make adjustments for budget or may be able to make adjustments in other areas. But I would like for us to design it first.
Alicia?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Neil, I guess unfortunately or fortunately, we need to submit the May revise within the next week, I believe, or something like that. But our subcommittees, I know like with language access, with Linda and myself, we've already forwarded what we think the need is or what our ideas are. So I'm hoping that every subcommittee has done the same so that you have those pots that hopefully there's projections of those pots that will then come together in terms of this is the budget that we have. So that's kind of, I mean, if we're going to have, if we want to go the route of developing the budget, we'd have to do it like today. And we'd have to know what we currently have in all the little pockets to see what that amount is. So yeah, the timing of the subcommittee is a little bit, it's almost like after the fact. But I'm hoping that I'm hoping every subcommittee has already forwarded what their need is. And I see that.
Yeah, Alvaro?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to comment that we do have information from the various subcommittees. What I was looking for from this particular committee is if it's going to be something different that we haven't already considered. And so that's where I think when you're designing it, that's the part that we would look at from the administrative side to determine, do we have those mechanisms in place for you to do that? And if we don't, at this point, that would be something that we would have to look into right now. But I believe that if we're modeling it somewhat to what it was done before, there is funding for that concept. If it's going to be widely different and we need to bring in some additional tools, then that's what we'll do at that point. But I wouldn't start looking at the budget to figure out what you can do. Let's figure out what you want to do, and then we'll figure out the other part.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, before we move on any further, Linda, I know you didn't get the link, and so I just want to check in with you. Did you have any comments or questions at this point?
No, at this point, I'm just trying to catch up on what went on before I got on.
Well, yeah, before you got on, we didn't do much. We took roll. I don't know. When we talked about the purpose of the subcommittee, I don't think you caught that part. We thought it was to explore, design, and oversee implementation of how the public will submit their input to the CRC with an eye on legal requirements, accessibility, and transparency. And then I'll get to you, Isra. Then the proposed purpose for today's meeting was to clarify the why and what of this subcommittee's role, and we'll work on the how we're going to design. We'll work on the design of the meetings later, design of the input meetings later. Isra?
I just wanted to add to the conversation about budget and design. I think we can approach it simultaneously. So as May revise happens and we get a certain amount, we can start building out what we think each meeting should look like. And if there's something, significantly out of budget or even under budget, that's when we would lean on our team to tell us like, hey, actually, we would need to tweak this or tweak that. And the beauty of having this structure for these types of design meetings is that we can also get that feedback from the public. If there's something that we're doing that can be significantly improved in some way, someone can call in and let us know if we are not catching that. But I don't think we should set a number right now. I think we should start building, and then Alvaro can tell us if we're reaching too far to the moon.
Okay. I feel like Jane wants to talk.
I did. Thank you. The one that I just realized, the mission, we're not designing all input because people can put public input through ways that aren't public input, like meetings. Right now, we're just talking about the meetings, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's why I want to make sure, because I don't want people to think, unfortunately, to do things last time, 2010, basically there was one way, and it was from the time they had the line drawer out there, and that's when, I mean, yes, certain things came into the commission, but most of it came in through their actual meetings. And we're trying to go, do not do that. That's not what we're doing this time.
Well, and
but
one of the things I want to make sure is it doesn't have to just be, let's throw away, again, I want to suspend kind of knowing and doing. There are things we know, but what is it that we would like? So today it's really about thinking creatively and kind of opening it up. And so it may be meetings, or it may be improving the systems we have. It's public input. So it is broader than that. Which actually kind of brings us to the next piece. But before we go to the next piece, I do want to bring to all of our attention that we did ask staff to be co-designers with us and to kind of participate with us. And so you staff, you're also welcome to raise your hand, ask questions, bring your ideas, because we're going to need to do all of this together. And we purposely are using all of our first names, because sometimes in our meetings we go by commissioner whatever, and then the staff, we call them by their first names. And so today we're all just gonna, if it's okay with this subcommittee, to call each other by our first names. And finally, though, one of the things that's kind of, Marcy and I always joke around about this, is try to figure out what is the staff's role and what's the commissioner's role. And so as we as we're moving forward and we're looking at tasks, or as we're designing, let's try as much as possible to be clear on whose role is what. And it may be on our strength versus our title, what we know how to do or whatnot. But let's try to always be clear. And if we're not being clear, let's just kind of call each other on, okay, who's doing that and whatnot. So if we can ask for that.
Okay, sorry, could I was finishing though, in terms of certain creative ideas that have actually happened already, sort of, because Alvaro was sort of saying, well, the budget is based on what happened last year. Not entirely, because the line drawing to build the contract did have to come up with, okay, we're not doing it quite like that. And so there are different items. There's line drawing in public input meeting. There are COI with the line drawer there, input meetings. And then there's input meetings with the public. These are all public meetings. They're like 3 different kinds built into the budget. So I just, in terms of already being creative, do not think that everything is based on last year. That's not true. And so we've already sort of, and because those have different costs and they're different locations and that sort of thing. So that kind of is in there. And some of those things, which is more like budget, this is a little more process. Some of those things we have to have, like the line drawing part of those, we have to have that part. So, and I just want to get that out there. And there are portions of it which we really need total input.
Jane, can we hold on some of this conversation until we get further down the agenda, because we will be talking about that. We don't, this will all be critical, but we want to bring it up later. Yeah, Linda.
So I'm just wondering, maybe we could do kind of like a hybrid. Is there like within just kind of like a general budget amount that we should just be aware of, given some of the basic things that we know we're going to need to have to do to satisfy, whether it's an in-person meeting or it's a virtual meeting? I know that there was discussion about doing kind of like half and half, right? So that may give us kind of like at least a baseline, and then anything else we do above and beyond that, we can start to then understand where we're making choices, so that we're not completely going to fly blind, but we're not also going to constrain ourselves so much that we don't be creative.
Yeah, and I think we need to kind of take a hybrid approach like that, right? Because there are constraints, budget constraints. But we really want to kind of start this meeting a little further back in kind of thinking about what it is we're trying to accomplish, and what it is we want out of the public input, and then begin to think of the hows we might go about it.
And just so that you all know, as you're bringing up things like what Linda just said, really says, hey, we need this information. As you throw out those things, we are taking it down, and at the end of the meeting, we'll say these are some of the things that we need to be able to do our work. And so please do bring them up as they come up, but don't feel like we're being ignored if we don't say yes, but we are writing it down.
Okay.
Linda?
I'm sorry.
Can I just make a suggestion in terms of what the question that you just asked? I think, Neil, you said, what are we trying to accomplish? Would you be open to just each of us, just one at a time, just speaking to that? It might just be more efficient, so that, because I think we're all going to have different opinions or definitions, but maybe if we get it all out at once, then we could start then kind of shaping after that.
That is a brilliant suggestion. So what we're going to do next is
exactly that.
We're going to do exactly that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Patricia to do this part. And so I'll just turn it over to her.
All right. As you can see, this is our whiteboard. You all can see it? It's just one big question right now. Can you see it?
Hey, Patricia, you introduced us to Miro. I wonder if that's something that we can all get onto. Is that something that you might want to use? Or is it too late?
Well, I thought about that, but it's actually harder to just get onto it than that, because I have to create a whole, I have a little tiny account, and my account's already all filled up. We did think about that, and I was like, I ran out of time to clear it up, so I apologize. But the thought was that we could do the old-fashioned way, which is still very similar, but pretend that this is a newsprint or flip chart, and before I start writing things up on the flip chart, I wanted to give you a second on why public input. Why is public input so important for the commission? We know that obviously it's important because it's in our charter, but why is it important? So if you can all just jot down your thoughts, and then we'll go around. We'll let Linda call on everybody. And I'll just type up as you all are sharing.
Sorry, another suggestion. If you send the Google Doc link to us, would it be too much of a mess if everybody typed it in themselves?
No, I was thinking about that at the same time, Linda, as you were saying that. Linda, you and I might be dangerous together.
I know.
But keep thinking while I do that piece. Oh, I have to put all the staff too. All right. Patricia, let's make sure. Linda, Jane, Trina, Israel, Patricia, Freddie. Okay, I think I sent it to everybody, and everybody's an editor. All right. So if you can check your email for the invite, or go to Google Docs and go Google Docs and then shared with me, you should be able to access the document. And you can go ahead and type. Marion, I have a question. Do we need to know who's typing what?
No,
Okay.
only if there's a vote.
Okay, thank you. Let me know if you didn't get the link, and I apologize.
The link's not yet coming up for me.
All right, Trina, let me make sure I invited you.
There it is.
Did you get it? Or
Yes, I have it.
that's weird how it goes in phases. Staff, are you going to join us in writing your thoughts?
Our personalities our backgrounds are so showing through on this. This is funny.
All right, so I'm gonna read some of these. I'll unbold it so. I'll read some of these out loud and go ahead and keep working on them as we're moving. Engage, why public input? What engagement, inclusion, everyone can participate. Differences, example, Hispanic community in Southern California can be very different from Central California or Northern California. It's their, meaning the Californians, it's their process. We are appointed to ensure that they are heard. Fair representation, one voice be heard. No way 14 individuals can know everyone's community of interest. Empowerment. Freddie, are you typing something in? I don't want to pass over you. No, okay. Public support by involvement and judicial recognition of input. Okay, that has to be Marion, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's true. The Supreme Court upheld all the challenges to the maps on the grounds of how widespread the input was.
No, I know. It just
I love the emphasis in here on all these different ones. This is fun.
Marion, just so you know, that is Neil and I's North Star in everything we do. That quote. Diverse voices representing the people of California, different perspectives, on the ground knowledge, understanding of the nuances of communities, i.e. the difference between one block from another block or one street difference versus another street difference, accountability to the people of California, transparency and trust in the process. Anyone can participate. Can't draw district lines without a COI, without a community of interest, without public. We are just drawing pretty lines. Who will be represented where? We need to hear from the public. To allow for feedback on draft map, to allow Californians to describe their communities of interest, to be heard. We all have multiple communities of interest and can be small and extend far as well. Ensure all Californians have a voice in the redistricting process so that Commission will know what is important to Californians when it comes to their representation. These are people's maps, so the people should be able to give input, to incorporate the voices of hard to count communities and let them tell us the stories of their communities, to ensure differently abled persons are fully able to engage. When people participate in a process, they have a stronger sense of ownership, to encourage transparency, to empower communities. Understanding of communities, what makes it a community, what unites them, what makes them unique. Therefore, and I think whoever was green, you left that sentence open. Thank you, Cecilia. Therefore, understand the choices and the trade-offs. Any themes you all are seeing here?
Yeah, I think the theme that I'm picking up is that the key value in the process lies and rests with people involvement, with a wide, varied level of a broad spectrum of people participating in the process. That is what will ensure a quality product in the end.
Yep. Others?
I think that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, there's some great quotes there. Thanks, everybody. I mean, we'll keep, I think what Trina summed it up really well. We value the engagement of people in the process. And I think also that the process is we're not able to do the process without people involved. It's the people, the people being involved is one of the 3 data points, as I like to think about it, that we need. And it's the one data point that you can't get from just having technology make the maps. And so therefore that's a critical piece. Any other thoughts? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Do we want to open up to public input right now, since we just finished that, just to see if the public has some thoughts on if we missed anything? Okay. Can we do, thank you, Katie.
Excellent. Oh, no. I lost my instructions. All right. In order to maximize transparency and public participation in our process, the Public Input Meetings Design Subcommittee will be taking public comment right now on the exercise that they just did. To call in, dial a telephone number provided on the live stream feed. It is 877-853-5247. When prompted to enter the meeting ID number provided on the live stream feed, it is 957-7301-9037. When prompted to enter a participant ID, simply press the pound key. Once you have dialed in, you'll be placed in a queue. To indicate you wish to comment, please press *9. This will raise your hand for the moderator. When it is your turn to speak, you will hear a message that says the host would like you to talk and to press *6 to speak. If you would like to give your name, please state and spell it for the record. You are not required to provide your name to give public comment. Please make sure to mute your computer or live stream audio to prevent any feedback or distortion during your call. Once you are waiting in the queue, be alert for when it is your turn to speak, and again, please turn down the live stream volume. And right now we do not have anyone in the queue, but I will hold on.
We will be creating notes from our sessions so that all the commissioners can kind of read what we've done and what our thought process was, as well as the public. So it won't be the transcript, but it will be summaries.
I wanted to bring my puppy in tonight. The instructions are complete.
Yes, all three of ours are barking right now. Katie, any callers? No?
No callers, Chair.
Okay. Neil, you're on.
Okay. So next, we thought we'd talk about the phases of public input and try to, I think, it seems like, well, I know Patricia and I, when we started talking about this, we both had very different visions of what the public input process would look like. And I think, I think all of us have some kind of idea of what we think that might look like. But we want to spend a little time talking about the different phases of public input and just try to kind of all come to the same place we can on what those phases are. And so that's the step we want to take at this point. So were we going to write those up on that so folks should see what we're doing?
Yes. And what we can do, well, before we share the screen, Neil, maybe we can do, as Linda was saying, just have everyone kind of just share what's been on their mind or how they see the three phases, and we can see if we're all on the same page. And then we can, or do you want to show what we thought, what you and I, okay.
You want to, yeah. Okay. So, and actually, I just had are you going to just put up the same document and we'll put it at the end or something?
Yeah, it's at the end of the same document.
Okay. So, so we had been thinking, I've lost where is everyone? What have I done here? Oh, okay. there you all are. It just dawned on me that we're missing, phase 0 on the list. And that's COI tool input, right? Because that's one of the phases of public input, is just folks going to the COI tool and using the COI tool, right? But then kind of the other phases that we're thinking of more like meetings were community mapping meetings, where this is kind of pre-census meetings where we would go meet with the community. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. I'm already messed myself up here, right?
So the COI, the community input, the community mapping incorporates all of it. So that's why we're saying not necessarily meetings, but there might be different ways that that's being done, along with the Voter Rights Act pieces that we need to look at, and racial polarizing voting.
Right. I'm sorry. And then, right. So
that's why we're doing this, is because we all
COI tool. Right. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. And then, yeah, but that's also pre-census kind of input. We would go out with the line drawer, and we could go out with the line drawer and have host public input meetings, go out or be virtual, but with the line drawer and host public input meetings, and take public testimony in a way that was similar to what they did last time. Or, I mean, this is why we're meeting, right? To figure out what those meetings look like. But prior to getting the census data, gathering public input. Then once the census data is out there, gathering public input, gathering input from the public after they've had a chance to look at the census data, and also to continue to collect community of interest input. There, potentially a space there for community groups to present, to make presentations and provide unity maps, and then we go into a map drafting phase where we're focusing on drawing our maps. During the time of that we're drawing our maps, we have to get public input and feedback on those maps too. So we have to, design public input meetings during that time too, to elicit that feedback and input on our draft maps. And so that's kind of the phases we were thinking, but we wanted to put that out there as a for a conversation for the group. To see where everyone's at and what everyone's thinking, to ensure that we have kind of the phasing right. So I'll just open it up at that. I don't know, Patricia, if you have any other comments on this part.
Sorry, I had to figure out where no, I think you did a great job, Neil. The big question we put, one of the questions I should say, is when do we, the community groups presentations and unity maps. We know that's in there somewhere, but we didn't know if this is the right order or any of that. So we kind of put it out there. But we'd love to go around and just hear from each of you kind of what if this is right. And I think, Alvaro, I would start with you saying, are these the phases that you were looking at when you were in the budget, just because we know in the future we've got the budget issue?
They do appear to be those that we've included in the budget, or that were part of last year's, with some modifications to our current situation with the COVID. So yes, that is essentially what we have.
Isra?
I just have a quick question related to all of these phases. Is there a point at which the CRC will no longer take public input? Is that triggered at the creation of the first draft maps, or at what point do we say, okay, public input is now closed, if at all?
Would you like me to try and answer that?
Well, either Marion or I can tell you.
Go ahead then.
But basically, once we say these are final maps, and we have a 3-day period before we go final. I mean, once we say these are final and we plan to, this is it, they pause for 3 days, we're not coming back. Yes, well, and then we're taking time going around with that. But yes, so there is, but it's not till we're essentially done.
Okay.
And then, or Isra, do you want to follow up on
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I need clarity on that because I'm hearing that we say these are the final maps and then we wait for 3 days. And during those 3 days, I guess I need some legal guidance on this from Marion too. During those 3 days, we don't touch the maps. And what is the point at that point? Like, are we not taking public comment at that time?
I think if there was something drastically wrong that the public notices that the commission didn't notice, it could be corrected during that time period. So that's like a last ditch. This is what we're going to do unless there's some really, really compelling reason why we shouldn't do it.
Okay. Yeah, that's exactly
And
it.
the question I wanted to add in, because it seems to me that it sounds like a good thing to say, but if we are drawing maps and public input is coming in at the same time we're drawing maps, I don't know how we will get to a final map. It seems like we almost need to stop accepting public comment at a certain date and then begin drawing the final maps, or the maps will continue to be fluid if we really are considering all input we're receiving.
Can I sort of walk through this process?
Can I just, yes, but I want to be careful as we're walking through the process that we don't get into the how and we just stay into because we do have on our agenda for the next meeting to really go through the budget, legal, all those pieces that we need to know as well. And so that we know how to constrict ourselves, but what we're really hoping for today is kind of open ourselves up and think of, are these the best ways? Are these the phases? And then what does public input look like in these phases? What do we need from the public?
Okay, can I just, basically what I would be talking about is draft maps down. Okay, because so essentially we're collecting and all that's 1, 2, 3 say, but once we say, okay, we're going to actually start drawing, we go in and draw. And then we say, here's our first draft. Then while we're getting information and everything, we cannot touch those for 14 days. I think you heard me talk about there's a 14-day, there's a 7-day, there's a 3-day. Those are time periods where we cannot touch the maps. Okay. We could be collecting information. We could be doing different things with it in public input, but we cannot touch those maps. They're posted, and that's for everybody because they did have time frames. They were exactly concerned what Trina said. Well, wait, so what am I shooting at? And so am I drawing? Wait, oh, they already got that in there. So there are distinct phases of the actual map drawing process. And so, boom, we make a pass, and it's at all of them, all 175 maps. They sit for 14 days. Now, during that time, we're getting input in, and that's when we might kind of go, oh, whatever, and then we do another round. Now, originally we were having the idea we could do several different rounds. We're going to get this squished. This is our time period is going to get really crushed. So what we have to do at a minimum is then we come up with then we can start drawing after that 14 days. Then we can do another, we actually draw. We've gotten all this other input, we can actually draw. And then once we say, this is our second phase, or if we want to do this multiple times, this be different iterations, But at a minimum, there's a second draft. Those sit for 7. Then we go, okay, da, 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 da. And we go, this is our final deal. And ideally, we'd have more play in that, but this is a minimum we have to do. And that's from draft on.
Alicia?
Okay, I guess the issue I've been dealing or wrestling with is when you look at the phases, and we've talked about it before in terms of community groups, presentations, and unity maps. I think I kind of have an issue that, like, if it's a community group presentation, like they're given their own meetings instead of going to the regular public input meetings. So I think for me, I know that's how they did it last time, but you know, when we get to the public input, everyone only has 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden, if it's a community group, you get more time. So I really have a problem with that phase 3, like community groups, presentations, and unity maps being separate. Like me as an individual, I can't come in because that meeting is just for those groups. So I think it's probably more of and I don't know if we've agreed to that. Like we're going to have separate meetings for community groups and unity.
No, that's why we're here.
Or maybe
to figure that out.
Alvaro has a.
Okay.
Yeah, so
okay, I guess I don't want someone to feel that there's more credence given to a community map versus an individual map. And I feel like by having these phases, it kind of does give that. In my mind, it kind of gives a little bit more weight. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong.
And Alicia, those are the type of questions we want to put out there right now and kind of wrestle with without necessarily answering them. Because answering them is getting us into the how. And based on how the process worked last time, I can understand why community groups needed that time, that 15, but if we were to do the process differently, so they weren't hearings, but they were more like, I keep saying charrettes building, but more like architecture, like you look at your community and we've talked about this, I'm not going into the how, but there are different ways we might do it. So we won't maybe not need that piece but does someone else want to share? So Alicia said, giving the community groups more time seems a little unfair to the individuals. And how do you weigh the 2 times? Neil and I have gone back and forth because we understood where this process went at different times. And so Neil, do you want to share what when you thought the communities presented their maps versus what I thought?
So it was my thinking that the community groups would present draft maps to us, and that would be post-census time. And I think Patricia thought that the community groups would come to us pre-census time. And so
I thought they would come post line drawing, like we would be playing around with the lines and stuff. We'd have the census stuff, and they would come at the end of the line drawing piece. And I think you were thinking they would come at the beginning of the line drawing process. Yeah.
And I also, sorry, go ahead. I also, in my mind, as we were having this conversation, I kind of got a differentiation between the idea of public input and feedback. And it seems to me that public input, that we're getting feedback after we draw the maps on what they think of the maps and what they think we missed. At that point, if someone wants to come with a new community of interest, I think, okay, but what we really need to know is what's happening, how are you feeling about our maps and giving us feedback? That just came to me as we were talking. So, did you want to say it, Jane?
Yes. Well, okay. In terms of just looking at the budget straight, but for this particular thing, there are certain things, we kind of drew a line at went before pre-census data, post-census data. And that, in looking at just budget-wise, kind of well, making sure that there was an extra space for the big presentations. That was considering them having a look at that just post-census, but before we started drawing maps. But I actually wanted to go back to the chart because I have 3 under the first one, community mapping stuff. I had a whole bunch. That wasn't one portion that I have. That's like, wait a sec, where's the education portion? Where, there's these things before that, and there's so if we could go back, we were talking, we kind of jumped to from number 4 down just for legal perspective, but up on community mapping, like as I see that, the line drawer was going to be with us both pre-census and post-census. Okay, so actually this hang on, but the community mapping, what it looks like the VRA, and the RPV, those are us looking at the public, but they're not actually, the public isn't necessarily giving us input on, right? We're looking at analyses and studies and things like that, is how I saw it. Where those are all kind of before we were actually, those are about the communities, but they're not involving the communities per se. Like they're coming in and telling us this, this, and this. Where the community of interest is indeed the public coming. We can't do that without them. Period. But that's also part of the education part. There's education. There's co-education. That's all involved to get people into the first part of community mapping. That's how I kind of envisioned this. And in that same phase, pre-census, after we have a couple of meetings, this is what I was originally thinking, in telling people how this is how you work with communities of interest, blah, blah, blah. This is, here's our map, here's our tool. Then we would also do some of those just collecting communities with our line drawer. And then
you're getting into how again?
Well, no, but only then would we go to number 2. See what I'm saying? So I have all these, there's these several different phases in that number, the I.
Well, it could be different. It might not be different phases, but it's different strategies within I. Different ways of how we're doing it.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
I guess what's confusing me, and I don't want people, because I know people are kept on going. There's also in community mapping, the way the contract is written is that the line drawer was going to be out to help us with some community mapping before the census data gets there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but I don't want that to be, people go, okay, I have to wait. None of that stuff exists. There's no participation until the line drawer is there.
Okay. Yeah. Let's not. We haven't even created the collateral and everything that's going to go with this. So we hear what you're saying. And I don't think the contract, we can work. The words don't need to be the same as in the contract. We need to figure out what are our words that we want to use in this process, because we've been using different terminology all the way through here.
Then I would change 2 and 3. I'd flip those.
Well, I'm not sure yet. I want to make sure we hear from everybody what they feel about
that's my thought on this. So.
Yeah, because my thought is similar to Alicia's. If we flip it, then we're giving a lot of power to the community groups, because they're coming in before we've even put together all the different pieces. They're saying, here's our maps.
This is before census data. So we want them to give their community maps.
No, number 2. The unity mappings isn't before census data.
That's where I'm wondering. Okay, then what do you mean by unity mapping?
This is where the collaborative groups are getting together and agree.
Redistricting.
What districts and how they want to do it and what it's going to look like. Linda?
Can I maybe this is the time where we do go one by one and might just be more simpler so that we don't get sidetracked.
Linda, go ahead.
Well, I I guess in terms of the phases, I am wondering, for me, I guess I would add an additional phase that goes back to what you were saying at the very beginning, the 0 phase, which would be, I guess in my brain, I was just thinking that what you're calling the community mapping, which includes the COI, the VRA, the RPB. I mean, to me, the COI, well, more the VRA and the RPB are the kind of things that we have to do. But in terms of a phase of public input, for me, it's like communities of input, communities of interest. So it would be like the COI tool, and whatever else we would be asking people to do to provide, just that preliminary level of public input. So like the COI tool that's electronic, the COI tool that's by paper, any public comment that people might want to send, they're scribbled on the back of the napkin kind of maps and other things like that. I feel like the VRA and the RPV are more the what we have to follow. So I don't know, maybe it's a subset that it's kind of like in parentheses, we got to make sure that we're following this, but it's not necessarily a phase per se. At least in my mind, that's what I was thinking. And then in terms of the line drawing with the census data and the COI, that makes sense to me. I am with Alicia in terms of what she said about the community groups doing their own presentation and unity maps. On the one hand, I feel like the unity maps make sense, but is there a way? This part I don't know, what might make sense, but I like the idea of the unity maps. I don't feel that having the community organizations make presentations, it doesn't feel equitable to me. So are we putting a group over the individual, that kind of thing? And I heard what you were saying too, Patricia, about, do we put them before we even draft our maps, or do we take their unity maps as public input, which is fine? We reserve the right to then just say, we'll take that under advisement, that kind of thing. I also do want to also, from a phase perspective, going back to the question that Trina asked, which is I know what Jane you were saying about, like the 1473, but even before that, are we going to put are we just going to put a pin in, draw a line in the sand and, once we start drafting that very first map, are we going to say, okay, 3 days before we draw that very first map, we're going to take a pause on public input, because if we're just getting stuff in at the same time we're actually starting the process, I could see that it's going to become a hot mess. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that it doesn't get discounted, but we do the draft map first. The 14 days, we can't do anything, and any input that we get in the, let's just say the 3 days between when we say we're going to stop and when we start drawing, that public input then gets put in with everything else at the end, or during that first phase. Then when we start the second draft, that public input will be taken into account because it's there. It just won't be taken into account in that first phase, because I could just see, I think that's just a question. It's not saying what we should do, but I do agree that what I was hearing Trina ask is, do we need to just say 3 days, 1 week, whatever, we're gonna say at this point we're gonna stop, and we're gonna move that public input that we receive in that period to the next phase of the map drawing. I guess that's it for me.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to capture, keep throwing the questions out. I am writing them all down on stickies, and I'll put it in the document so that we do follow up later. Trina, you had your hand up ready to go for next.
Yes, absolutely. On the phases, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to think of the phases different than chronological. I'm wondering if we cannot hold the public to any set timeline and perhaps internally hold what was submitted for a time that can be processed. so that if we are receiving input from Unity maps from community groups or what have you, that way it doesn't give it a perceived priority, or that we're putting it on the back burner. It just was a different type of input. So for me, looking at how you have it, I think all of these are necessary and important parts. And what would make a difference is just the pre and post census, if we have the data or if we don't have the data. But that's all I would have to offer, because I've thought them through in a couple of different ways. And all I can come up with ultimately is that we don't want to have people sitting on information, not submitting, waiting to submit, it gets lost, sidelined, any of the above. I'd rather for us to be the holders and keeper of the information and just understand the intent as it was submitted.
Great question. Yes, Marcy.
And just to piggyback on what Commissioner Turner just noted, I think there perhaps may be organizations who may do workshops where they would come up with maps, during a workshop throughout this process, that may be, submitting a map that represents the viewpoint of 30 people or something. And so I think factoring in that could come in at other points as well, versus like larger statewide maps or for an entire region or something.
Thank you. Go ahead, Isra.
Thank you. And I'll just react to the phases that are listed here. I don't see them as one happening and then the next happening. I feel like education is something that's weaved throughout. Input is clearly weaved throughout because we haven't even formally launched our input process, yet we have people who have already submitted. So I feel like this might just be something, it's going to be messy all the way through. We're going to be educating at the same time that we're gathering input and vice versa. And then in terms of the piece related to community group presentations versus not, I guess, I don't know what a community group is. Is me and my neighbor a community group? Is a 501c3 a community group? What constitutes a community group, and what makes someone or a group of people eligible to present during that phase versus another? So I that part is unclear to me. And I also feel like that is prioritizing a certain structure of input being given to the commission over others. So that's just something that we should flesh out a little bit more throughout these series of meetings.
Great questions. Thank you. Freddie?
Alvaro's been waving his hand.
I think Alvaro and then Jane.
Well, Alvaro, I'm going to hold off on you for a second. If Freddie?
No, I'm good.
You're good? Okay. No reactions to this? These are the phase. This is exactly what you were thinking. So we read your mind?
No, not really. I'm soaking in what folks are saying, because this has been an issue from the beginning when we were doing the presentation, even is trying to identify where the phases start and end. And it seems like it is going to be a messy process. And even if we as the commission draw rigid timetables for, hey, this is where COI's going to stop, this is where line drawing's going to start, the community is still going to be providing COI input till the end of the process. And how do we manage that, right? Getting different forms of information through the process so that at the end we come up with maps that took everything into account.
I think I shared with everybody, if not, I did at the last meeting, that the question that came up to me that kind of made me stop, but I answered flippantly, but I'll still stick to my answer, was how are you going to measure competing communities of interest? How are you going to figure out competing communities of interest? And my answer was, great question. I'll let you know when we do it. It's keeping me up at night. And so that will be part of, I think, the process. At some point we'll define criteria besides the 6. But it's a great, I think a lot of us will be up at night now thinking about all of this because we haven't. Alicia, Alicia, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Okay. Trina, did you want to add to your original comment? You're on mute, hon. Sorry,
I was
keep
just
people behind
really,
today.
I was curious to hear what Alvaro was going to add.
I was getting to Alvaro, but I wanted to get to the other staff first on purpose. Patricia?
I think my thought is, when I was listening to Commissioner Turner, is looking at the three different phases as we're discussing them, right? Are we going to be clear with the public that they don't have to wait from one phase until the next one, right, to submit their public input, and the different ways that they could do that, right? So if they were to look at this timeline, that there is no confusion, right? That throughout the process, we could be receiving public input. And so I just wanted to say as well, how do we define the community group, like Commissioner Ahmad was mentioning when she was speaking? So I think some of these questions are the questions that I was having when I was looking at the different phases.
Jane, I see you, but I'm just gonna, I was gonna call on Alvaro. There is a purpose to my madness on how I'm doing this, I promise. Go ahead, Alvaro.
Yes, I know what you were doing. You're waiting for everybody to answer or bring up the points I was going to bring up. So now I don't have anything to say. No, I'm just kidding. I do have a couple of things to say. First of all, as far as the input is going to be continuing throughout the process. So behind the scenes, we'll have to have a cutoff date. We're going to use this information at this point to work on our maps, but the input will continue to come. At the next iteration of that map, we'll use that input information until that next cutoff point, and so forth, until the final maps are completely drawn. Now keep in mind, I believe there was additional input provided even after the maps were approved and submitted, and it was all gone. So there will be continuous input throughout the process and beyond the process. So the cutoff points are more for the line drawer to take that information and create those maps and those iterations of those maps at the different points. So collecting all that information. So that was one of the points I wanted to make. The second point in regards to community groups, those presentations. One of the things that I recall hearing was that some of these community groups came to the different events that were hosted in the various locations and essentially dominated the conversation by bringing either their membership or individuals that were basically reiterating what was being said by the organization. So not necessarily allowing the individuals from those communities to provide the input that they wanted to provide. So it is going to be a very interesting balance that the commission is going to have to establish so that more weight isn't given to one group versus another group, that the weight across the board by individual is provided. The other thing I wanted to point out is that some of these community groups, they have workshops. I believe it was Patti that brought it up, that some of these groups have workshops where they're working with their community, getting their input and providing that input to the commission on behalf of their community. So it's not like they're doing it in a silo. They're actually getting input from the community members, their designated community of interest. And so we don't want to also limit that input, even though it's coming from a collected group or a group that has collected this data. So those are a couple of the points that I wanted to share.
Alvaro, can I ask you in the future if you can make your points as questions so that we keep asking questions versus answering, because we're still in a process where we're trying to stay open and so I did turn a lot of yours into questions because there are a lot of questions came up from what you said.
Sure, and one of the other questions I wanted to throw out there, the commission can decide when to collect that information. Although we had done it a certain way the last time, doesn't mean that we absolutely have to have it before the census data or after the census data. That's something that the commission can decide. So I'll moving forward, I'll present my points as questions like in Jeopardy. What is?
I just thought about that right when you were. Okay, Jane, you're up on Jeopardy.
Okay. What are the different types of input? Because they will all come in at different times. And can indeed, I have an opinion on this. Can we try to get all community maps in before the census data? And can we talk about redistricting maps as other types of maps? And can we define and use those terms consistently? So we can talk about redistricting maps and community of interest maps or community maps. They are not the same thing. And so we'd like to get people that in their minds, all the community stuff can be done now before. And can we, and then all the redistricting things can't happen until after the census. And that's where we can, can we ask them to hold their redistricting? Don't send any of that stuff to us until after.
Jane,
and try to send everything. Can we ask that?
Jane, can you explain to us what you mean by redistricting mapping is different than community mapping?
Yes, and this is how it is defined in the line drawing contract. Community mapping are communities of interest. That doesn't mean you're not saying where a district is going to be. Redistricting maps are, this is where I want the district lines to be. And those are different maps. And that's different types of input.
Okay.
There are other input too.
Okay, so I think that was a good clarification. We do need to go on break. Neil and I kind of discussed this because we are close to the end of our agenda. One of the options is to take an hour break for dinner and then go back for an hour and a half again. But we don't think that we have an hour and a half on the back end. So we would like to recommend to go on a 15-minute break and come back maybe at the most for half an hour, 45 minutes. Neil, does that look about right? Since you're looking at the agenda. Okay. Does that sound good to everybody? Thumbs up.
In the agenda, is it talking about when we try to put the next thing together, next meeting?
We have it already. We have the next meeting scheduled.
Great.
Well, I looked at the agenda today and it's not on there. So we thought it was going to be put on the April 1st agenda.
Yeah, Alvaro, I thought that was what you had told me. You and Commissioner Kennedy.
I'll look into that and get back to you.
Okay.
We still have 14 days, so it could be added. It
is today, and Commissioner, I did talk to Commissioner Kennedy about it. It has to do with how the front page sets up, and that's what gets announced to everybody. It is actually technically on. If you go down to page 2, it is there, but it's not on the first page.
Oh.
Yeah, that's part of the glitch. It's like, oops, okay. So that was.
Okay, so what we'll do is go on a, yes, Freddie.
I was just going to say that I've recommended setting up agendas individually for committees from commission so that we don't have that confusion. And it's a clean split.
Great idea. I think what we'll do then is do a 15-minute break. So we'll come back at 5:45 and finish up with, did everyone gave their thoughts, right? Except for Neil. And then and maybe open up for the public comments, because I'm sure if they might be interested in giving some input on this. Reminding that the public that we're really on asking questions. What are the questions we need to answer? And you're welcome to try to answer our questions, but and we'll take that input. But we're still just in the kind of discovery phase and thinking through what information and whatnot we need. So thank you and have a good break. Hi, welcome back, everybody. Katie, can you check for, or can we do public comments, please?
Yes, Chair. Okay. In order to maximize transparency and public participation in our process, the Commissioners will be taking public comment by phone. The Public Input Meetings Design Subcommittee will be taking public comment by phone. Can we hype, just kidding. To call in, dial the telephone number provided on the live stream feed. It is 877-853-5247. When prompted to enter the meeting ID number provided on the live stream feed, it is 957-7301-9037. When prompted to enter a participant ID, simply press the pound key. Once you have dialed in, you will be placed in a queue. To indicate you wish to comment, please press star 9. This will raise your hand for the moderator. When it is your turn to speak, you will hear a message that says the host would like you to talk and to press star 6 to speak. If you would like to give your name, please state it and spell it for the record. You are not required to provide your name to give public comment. Please make sure to mute your computer or live stream audio to give any feedback or distortion or to prevent any feedback or distortion during your call. Once you are waiting in the queue, be alert for when it is your turn to speak. And again, please turn down the live stream volume. At this time, we do not have anyone in the queue.
Today, I just
And
want to
now
go
we
back
do.
and make sure. Oh, okay, go ahead.
And the floor is yours.
Hello, this is Renee Westa-Lusk, and I guess I have a concern about the committee kind of moving I'm talking about this subcommittee moving slowly because according to the timeline, unless I've got the wrong one, that was in the redistricting basics PowerPoint or handout, you have June through October public input meetings coming up, and that's like less now than 2.5 months from now to start the public input. And I feel the public needs directives or lists of what is acceptable to include in your public input. What criteria are you looking for, to prove your community's interest of being together with, say, another community. I think some progress needs to be made that way quickly, because unless the timeline gets revised, I don't see how you're going to get to helping the public know what they're supposed to be talking about exactly. And that's my comment. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that input. I think that's really critical input. And at the last commission meeting, we did ask the outreach, the collateral subcommittee to start working on the community of interest information, putting together some of that material that you're saying that we need. So that process is working parallel to what we're doing right now.
And that was everyone in the queue.
I got that right, Jane, at the last meeting? You had for COI information, we had said, hey, we need some information on that. And so you had given it to the collateral group.
Actually, it's called the materials group. It's collateral, seems like collateral damage. So it's the materials group. Yeah. And yes, the materials group took that idea and went, yes, it's time to modify and put up some more actual details, presentation, information.
And for this meeting, we did do some research, which we'll be sharing when we put the meetings together, just how other groups are doing community of how they're defining it, looking at some of the workshops that like Common Cause has done and such things like that, just to inspire us and think differently, as well as to help in those conversations. So we'll be sharing that. Cecilia, before we go to the end of our agenda, did you have anything you wanted to add? Because I didn't call on you because you were down below. I mean,
got it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I guess the only thing I did want to add now that I think about it was, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time, but it is on my mind. I know it's been difficult to solidify a timeline because of the census data, but for purposes of input, if there is a timeline that we have that we would like to see, that would be helpful for when we're planning some of our social media posts or even engaging media to do some earned media where they can kind of help us amplify the message and when folks want to engage. That would be helpful if there's a way that we can get some kind of a timeline. I know it's been a challenge, but even if it is, I know that now they can input on the COI tool, but if there's some way that we can solidify some kind of a timeline to plan more in conjunction with the requests that are being made of the public.
Thank you. Yes, Neil.
Before we go on to the next step, I just had a couple comments, if that's okay. So I think this conversation was great. I think there's a lot of inherent and underlying assumptions in kind of the approach that was put together. An approach had to be put together in order to do contracting, in order to begin to budget and stuff like that. And so I think this was great that we've got a lot of these questions out there. And we needed to get those questions out there. We need to, now we know we need to work on answering these questions, and more questions will come. So I just want to thank everyone for this conversation. I think it's been really helpful for me. I had a mental model of what this should look like, and I'm trying to be a little more open-minded, but these questions are great that I hadn't thought of, many of them. And so thank you all. And we'll get this kind of summarized together and get it out in the notes when we're done.
Thanks, Neil. Some of the next, Marcy had asked if she could just talk to us briefly and brainstorm a little bit about the CRC hosted redistricting basics that we wanted to do. We had talked about having them. We had talked about having them at all certain different times and weekends and such, and we're still looking at some of the budget constraints and costs. And I think Alicia wants to say, go ahead, Alicia. Are you raising your hand?
Oh, no, I didn't want to. I wanted to wait till you were done, but I think that's great. Okay. Just so that you know, Linda and I, as part of the language access, what we were thinking with the CRC redistricting basics is we were thinking it might be a good idea if we did at least 12 or 13 and did it in the English plus the 12 languages that we've talked about in terms of translating, so that okay, next Tuesday it's going to be in Spanish, and then the week after is going to be in Tagalog. So we're just thinking maybe that would be helpful for communities if they know that there's a presentation that's going to be in a specific language. So I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility.
Yes. And I think, Neil, did you have anything you wanted to add kind of on when looking at the cost and making it a standalone versus a part of an already existing business meeting or a subcommittee meeting?
Yeah, we don't have those answers yet, but the question is, would it be more cost effective to put them at the end of a standing meeting and just add an hour on the end of a standing meeting, in order to be more cost effective. And Alicia and I are working on getting the answers to those questions.
Yes, Linda?
It just kind of popped in my mind that what if we schedule, like, in the various languages, one right after another, maybe over 2 days or something like that, where I know it sounds intense, and it is, maybe 3 days then, where we have like maybe a half-hour break in between each presentation, and we could rotate. We could rotate each one of us to do one,
Yeah, no, it sounded funny when it was one, but then I was like, wait, it could only, I think, let me please hand the meeting over to Marcy for this part. Marcy's shaking her head, but Marcy. So if you can just give some of your thoughts, or if you want to run with some of the thoughts that are here.
Yes, and I just wasn't prepared to be facilitating this, but thank you for the opportunity. And I know we discussed this before, and I'm glad that the commission is looking at exploring hosting some redistricting basics meetings. Commissioner Kutagawa, I think what you highlighted is an interesting angle, but I would recommend that they do get spaced out in order to allow various opportunities for the public to be able to participate over time. I think the commission is doing a great job of getting to different communities through the community-based organization hosted redistricting basic meetings, but for the commission to also host meetings that are open to anyone can really allow for all communities across California to participate and to be able to be educated on the role of the commission and how they can engage as well. I think I would like to hear other thoughts. I think Commissioner Fernandez, what you noted about language access, particularly that the commission is looking to already translate the PowerPoint into the all the approved languages. This is an opportunity to utilize that through the presentations as well. But hearing, what other folks are thinking in terms of ways to look at these CRC hosted presentations and ways to spread the word about them as well. Commissioner Turner, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm wondering on the video that we did that has all of the commissioners participating, and I know Freddie gave an update of that on yesterday or day before. I'm wondering what would that look like to run those and have those available with in language actually. So it's still the commissioners, but we have we hire in contract with whoever it is that would do the interpretation with that's the voice overlay, and we have those available to run. And I'm wondering then the wonder part, I skipped ahead. The wonder part is what would be the difference in running that video either back to back at regular times, et cetera, and then still in a session where we're there where we can answer the questions as opposed, because it's not like they're necessarily interactive. Maybe some people run theirs that way. For the most part, I go through the presentation and then do Q&As. And so from that perspective, there really is no difference. They could have the video, we could have the video run and be on to answer questions. And it seems like that would suffice.
That's really a helpful idea. What are your thoughts in terms of with questions? And I think this is a broader one also, would that be live? Would those be through a chat? Would those be in language? Would we need an interpreter for the question and answer session also?
And I think that's where the scheduling would come in. So the answers would be yes, yes, and yes, because if we provide the in-language support, then we would want then when that's rolling to have people there to respond in that same language. And I think it can be a combination of us answering live in moment, if indeed, because I know we've been doing a lot of work on Q&As that typically come up. We can roll with typical questions. At some point, there's not but so many things you can answer about that basics presentation, because we are trying to keep it somewhat consistent. So I see it happening both ways. We can just be on or join in at a certain time to be there to answer questions. And we also can prepare a Q&A and say, now here's what is typically asked. Let's answer for you.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Sinai, go ahead.
I really like that, Trina. And I remember at one point, Alvaro, you had said call them coffee with the commissioners. And when you had said that, it kind of made me think of like a Facebook Live where the commissioner goes live and people ask questions and you just kind of answer them right there. But it could be, we show the face on Facebook Live or YouTube, we show the video and then we have a commissioner there or two commissioners to answer questions. But it seems a little less time consuming and less, more cost effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for sure, I was just gonna say real quick, if you get into Facebook Live, you can always do watch parties off of the video that's already done, and then you can answer questions in a moment too.
Commissioner Anderson, go ahead.
These are all really fun ideas. I love it. When we're talking about the timing, these are specific languages with specific groups of people. Can we target those people in their language and say, what would be the best time for you guys? Because can we actually target that well, and then arrange that video and for those times, and possibly, because thinking quite a few of them will probably be towards the evening or that sort of thing, and then kind of do segments that are specifically for particular languages, because we'd have to incorporate that to the particular outreach groups who are discovering the real need. But I was wondering if we could do that. But that's a question.
Commissioner, thank you. Commissioner Turner.
Alicia, Commissioner Fernandez is also waiting.
Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead. Commissioner Fernandez, sorry. This is hard, you guys.
Jane, that's kind of... Sorry. See, it's not easy, Marcy.
I'm taking notes.
Jane, yeah, that's exactly what we do. Would be to target it, and that's right. That's what we would do is we target to certain groups, and then also I would envision that this would be taped so that if someone is unable to view it or be live, they could go back and at least view it and listen to some of the questions. So that would be the purpose, to try to engage as many as possible. Obviously, we can't catch everyone, and everyone has different schedules. But yes, so that was a very good point.
Thank you. And what I was going to just offer is that once the videos are recorded, and then there isn't like the overdub with the language access or what have you, that can be on our website accessible. And then through analytics, it can be tracked to see who pulled down which video. And if it was listened all the way through, if it was actually, you can tell all of that with analytics. And so we can track and say, yes, that this particular one that was translated into Hmong was listened to 5 times, this one that we did that we thought was so important, no one ever listened to it, and not that that's the end all be all. We certainly can do some other stuff, but I'm talking about ready, easy access. So then it will be available at whatever time people want to engage as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Sinai, go ahead.
Patricia, I'm going to use our idea one more time. But Patricia and I worked today to figure out how to do a presentation with 2 commissioners, one commissioner from San Diego and one commissioner and me, the state commissioner, redistricting. And we came up with kind of the idea of doing it more as you're sitting down and interviewing each other. And it could be a coffee with a commissioner, whatever, with the someone who's bilingual translator, And so they're taking the questions, they're asking it us and to us in English and then translating what we're saying. But it's instead of it being simultaneous, it's more like they're having a like if you were being interviewed by ethnic press or something like that. So it looks more inviting.
Go ahead, Commissioner Anderson.
This is sort of along the same lines of, because we're sort of talking about language here. It's not exactly about the education presentation, but I'm thinking, because if we record these and they're specific, like these languages, here are these certain presentations, we could also do the same with any COI input or actual district line drawing that are in those particular languages, and tag those into the same spot on the website for people of particular languages could go to, because often the people in the same language, they're talking about the same area. And I'm specifically talking about the smaller languages, not like the ones that were towards the end, towards the last ones that are getting on board. Those communities would often be similar, and so they might actually then locate the same information of all the stuff that they can follow their area in their language very easily if we locate it all on the same one spot on the website by language, essentially. That was an idea.
I think that might be more of data management.
Yeah,
discussion.
I'll turn it into a question. How's that? And put it in our question. Can we?
Yeah. I will. It's the logistics of that more, I guess, should be to the website. Mr. Commissioner Seha, Director Seha with his hat on.
But what I'm hearing, the consensus is.
I'm sorry, my sister is outside I'm by a glass window. She didn't realize I was sorry. Go ahead.
I'm so used to being shushed. I'm like, okay. I have 2 teenage kids, so one of what I'm hearing on the consensus is we'd like to have the CRC hosted. Let's not call it CR. We'd like to take the videos that we have and make sure that they're accessible in the 12 languages that we have agreed to, and then and staff to think through maybe how we would do the Q&A portion of it and how we can make it as accessible as possible. Is that kind of where we're coming to, that it makes more sense than trying to do live CRC? It doesn't make sense for us to do the whole presentation live, but have the videos so they're more accessible to people at different times. But we would schedule when we're going to do them, because we'd do the Q&A after, kind of like a movie screening.
That's what I'm saying. And in addition to that, if there is a request for a live, I think we should follow what we've said we would do with advanced notification. So I just don't mean that to exclude the opportunity to have a presentation live with interpretation. I think we should still do that. I'm talking about utilizing the video that we have, having it interpreted, translated, and made available for easy access across the state for anyone, whether it's a large grouping or someone that happens to not be in an area with a whole lot of people that speaks whatever your language is. The beauty of this is that they still will have access and be able to look at the video. And I'm hoping that whatever the standard Q&A questions that we're typically getting will be as an attachment where they can access it. So I think that's one piece. And then I want to make sure that we're not saying that we would exclude and not be able to provide the other services that we said we would at the onset.
Clarity on the services that we said we would do on the onset.
Yeah, we talked from the beginning. We talked from the beginning about people that's needing translation to make the request a couple of weeks in advance or give them some advance notification, and we would provide translation services. I want to make sure that we're still doing that.
Thank you. Yes, Alicia.
And then just for confirmation to Marion, these CRC sponsored events, we can have more than one commissioner, correct?
Yes, no more than 2.
If they're sponsored and they're public agendized in the whole bit, I
Oh,
said
if
it could
they're
be
public,
up.
yeah, if they're public, you can do as many as you want.
Do you have, Marcia, a good enough to move forward?
I just wanted to clarify. So I think there was 2 points. It's one, doing a dubbing interpretation of the CRC video, but then secondarily doing the CRC hosted presentations live with public notice. And then for each of those, doing those in English and then doing like an additional channel interpreted in the 12, 13 languages. Am I understanding that?
Well, that's not what the commission is doing right now. They're just doing that for the public comment portion. I mean, it could be extended, but they're not doing a total translation of everything.
I'm sorry, for the redistricting basics presentation.
Yeah, I think, Marcy, I think where we got to is to not do the CRC hosted meetings live, to not do that part, to do instead to translate the video that we're putting together, and then schedule times where we will show that video and then have commissioners available live
For question and answers.
for Q&A, instead of doing these hosted CRC things that we were thinking about.
And to do the Q&A in language?
Yeah, provide interpretation for the Q&A.
Okay.
But it may be on one specific language at a time. So we're going to do the Vietnamese video. Yeah, so we set it up and we do outreach to the Vietnamese community. And we say, come to Facebook Live at this time to watch it. Watch this presentation on redistricting. We have the presentation that's dubbed, and then the last half hour would be a commissioner, doing Q&A in language. So we'd have a translator in Vietnamese, not in all 12 languages.
And that would also be recorded so that it could be posted. Hopefully the questions would be fairly universal.
Mm-hmm. And then we'd move on to expand, do each of them.
Commissioner Anderson.
I have a question with this. Was that what Trina was saying? Because I wasn't quite clear if I thought she was saying that if certain people say, that's great, now we really want to have an interpreted, you guys presented to us, that we were still talking about doing that. Is that not?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not replacing all of them, all of our sponsored meetings with just the video.
Well, the original plan was, or the original thought was, that we would host 15 public meetings, right? 3 in English and 12 in interpreted in other languages.
Education.
That we would just schedule these and host them.
Okay, and these are strictly, you're talking about 15. This is just the presentation, education presentation thing.
Right, education presentations with Q&A. But what we're talking about now instead is having our education presentation that we all put together translated into the 12 languages, schedule a presentation, schedule a time for each of those, for the video to be shown in each of those 12 languages, have live interpretation services for Q&A at the end of those, and also have opportunity for groups if they specifically request us to give an education session in language.
Okay, and thank you. And that was a clarification. And my real question is, are we, because I see very soon here, even like Mr. Westerlux keeps on saying, okay, but when are you going to give us more info about other stuff? You know, the education, like when is that evolving? Like when our materials committee comes with, this is how we think we should be working, introducing.
Right, Jane, you asked the committee to start working on that, and as soon as we've got an updated presentation, we'll move towards that presentation.
But we can include that same idea with these meetings. That's my question. Is that we're not saying that's just it, this is it, period.
Yeah.
That public input education includes different types of education.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you. That's what, thank you.
Alicia?
Yes, I just want to make it clear that when we're talking about the California Redistricting Commission sponsored events, then if they request an interpreter, we will. But there have been occasions when some organizations have requested the presentation in a different language. For those instances, we would not provide the interpretation. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands the difference between the two.
I need you to say
Hopefully
it
I
again.
didn't make it any. Okay, so for the CRC, gosh darn it, I just went blank. For the ones that we're putting on, we will provide the interpretation, but there have been community-based organizations or groups that have requested that we conduct the presentation in Spanish. That's the organization, us going to their meeting. In that situation, we have told them that they need to provide the interpreter because it's their event. Does that make sense?
I was not
and I
aware
want
of
to make
that.
sure that.
That is a difference. I was not
Yes.
aware of that. I thought that with advance notification, we were providing translation services for them, so that's good.
No, for our meetings, like for our public input meetings, anything that we're sponsoring, if they provide at least 5 working days advance notice, yes. But if it's their forum, their meeting, then they need to provide whatever interpreter services they require or requesting. But now that we're going to have now that we'll have the video in different languages, that might solve itself.
That's really good. Okay.
And just for clarification on what Alicia's saying, it is the redistricting basics public presentations. I think for our business meetings, we are not going to be translating or interpreting the entire meeting as it's been requested, only because it is very expensive. What we did say though is that we will continue to provide interpretation for public comment, but not for the entirety of the business meeting. But for the public education meetings that the CRC would host, or if we're going to just do the videos, then it kind of makes it moot. But if we were, anything that we would host as a public education, we were going to provide the interpretations for that part in the 12 languages also. In the 12 languages that we also wanted to make that. And but for public comment, we would provide interpretation in any language as long as we have the advance notice. And Alicia, I think we were going to say, even for the public education, if we had an advance request, we would try. Did we say we would try to provide interpretation for the public education meeting, or was it just the 12 languages? It's been a while.
What are you talking about, the public education? Sorry, I think we have to
basically the redistricting basics presentation, but I guess that might become moot if we're just going to do only the video.
Yeah, and if it's a CRC sponsored,
yes.
Then we will provide. It'll be the video plus we'll also have an interpreter there for that, because for the Q&A we need an interpreter for that piece of it. So for CRC sponsored, we do.
CRC sponsored, but for if we're doing the redistricting basics, but are we going to limit it to just the 12 languages, or did we say, this is the part I forgot. I can't remember. Did we say we would do it for any language that would be requested, since they're going to have
We
to
would
be
say,
there?
okay, so what we said we would do is for the 12, if they give us advance notice, we are contracting for that. And if it's beyond the 12, we would try to find, we'd try to contract with someone for that. We
But
can't
no
guarantee, but we're going to try like we did with the Somali and Oromo. They weren't part of the 12, but we were able to contract. So yes, that's what we'll try to do the best we can to contract, as long as we're given it the 5 business days. But beyond the 12, there's no guarantee that we'll find someone and can contract in time.
So I'm gonna go ahead, Trina.
Yeah, I just want to say this is an important distinction, and I'm not sure how I missed it, but I want to state that it does represent a shift from what I've said, or a change, because prior to right now, we have not done any publicly sponsored redistricting basics in the manner that we're talking about. So as we've been going out, requested, asking people, do they want us to come? And yes, they do, and we're showing up. Or those have been the redistricting basics education meetings. And I thought what we had told people is that if they asked in advance, we would provide also interpretation services or translation services in those public basic education meetings. So what I'm hearing now, and I don't know that it was just me that thought that, but I want to make sure that everyone is clear, and maybe even the broader team, that any education sessions we're doing, if we're doing them, we're only doing English education sessions for the basics. So I'm glad that, yes, we have a video now, and we're going to translate and have it, shown in all the languages or what have you. But I just think it's important to note that we have not made that available, and I thought we were going to.
I think what we had said that if commissioner, we did do kind of a language to figure out how many languages commissioners spoke, to see if there was languages commissioners felt comfortable in, so we can expand it a little bit. But I don't remember hearing that we would provide a translator, except I could see where you would think that because of the grants program. We have talked about interpretation locally and how do we fund that. Linda?
So if I can make clarification. So up until now, we said, yes, it would only be in English. So you're absolutely right, Trina. For the business meetings, it would only be in English. We did agree upon, and we recommended, and I believe it was voted upon, that we would provide interpretation for public comment only in a language, as long as they gave us advance notice to secure an interpreter. And that's what we've done only once. More recently, in the Language Access Committee, Alicia and I have had this conversation. This has not been formally presented to the commission. We thought we would debut it here because there is a consideration that for the public input meeting, that there be some type of interpretation. Within that, we also did talk about that a meeting that the CRC, the Redistricting Commission, hosts, so us, that we would host, then we would consider, and we propose providing interpretation at least in the 12 languages we know we're going to be contracting for. So the likelihood is that with the advance notice, we'll be able to secure the interpreters. Any languages outside of the 12, we would still need the advance notice, but we cannot guarantee that we would be able to provide it because, the whole contracting and being able to do that. We'll try our best. We managed to do that with the Somali and the Oromo interpreters for the public comment for the business meeting. However, I also want to be clear that that as a language access committee, Alicia and I did talk about whether or not we should also extend the interpretation services for the any full meeting to our business meetings. And we have agreed that we will still not provide full interpretation for the entirety of a business meeting. We would still provide the option to have a interpreter for public comment only. And that's still what it is, but we're just kind of presenting it here for the first time, and we have not presented it in full to the commission. So don't feel like this is like, did I miss something?
We are getting towards the end of the time we had agreed to meet with a short break. Alicia, then Marcy, and then Neil and I. Well, Neil, and then we wanted to just do a kind of a wrap up, as well as I think we need to do public comments one last time. So Alicia.
Maybe.
Alicia, your internet.
I don't know if you want to get into this language access part, but what Linda and I were talking about is, like, for our business meetings, if they wanted a specific agenda item, like when we had the language access, we were talking about interpreting the entire conversation for that agenda item, not just their public input piece of it. So that is something that we will probably recommend, which makes sense, because why just public input? You need to hear the whole conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we move forward, and this goes along with the public input design, is if we know when we get a request for, let's say, Spanish, what we would recommend moving forward, and it's something we have to keep in our mind, is, okay, so if we know the meeting on July 12th, we have someone or we have individuals that are requesting Spanish, and maybe some that are requesting Tagalog. What we would recommend moving forward is, okay, between 9:30 and 11:30 is going to be Spanish, so that we can line up the Spanish interpreter. And then from 11:30 to 1:30, if anybody wants Tagalog, we'll line up. But again, we'd have to have advance notice, so that we are more efficient, I guess, with the use of our interpreter.
Mm-hmm.
And I use my hands a lot.
I think we're losing the end of your comment there,
Marcy.
Alicia.
Oh, she froze.
Hello? Oh,
Yeah.
Am I frozen?
No, Marcy. Alicia, go ahead.
I guess I would just push, going back to the previous conversation around use of the video, a dubbed video, and then doing a Q&A after. I think one other angle to look at to perhaps do the presentation live is because then we would be able to use a translated PowerPoint for the interpretation section as well. So I think the value of that as well. I think also just understanding what the process is, if you're just doing, like, if you are playing a video, but then you're going to do live Q&A, if it's any different to just also have the presentation live already, because you're going to be doing live Q&A.
Okay, I want to kind of wrap up this, but go ahead, Trina. This is where we ask staff to come back with some recommendations.
Sure. Yeah, I
Right,
just think that's something to highlight.
Trina.
So with Brian, or whatever the gentleman's name is, and he'll still have all the piece parts. And so to me, it seems like it would be perhaps a different cost, but easy enough to slide in the PowerPoints in the appropriate language as well.
Oh, okay.
So Neil.
So I just want to be clear. We're not making this decision right now. We're making suggestions. And so Marcy, if you could kind of take a look at the suggestions that we've made, and then we need to bring this back to the full commission for a decision.
Okay. Oh, and in sign language.
Sign language should always be provided if it's a commission meeting.
Yeah, that has to be.
But I mean, in the videos that we're doing, to have the video.
Yeah, the 12 plus ASL.
If you're sponsoring it, it has to be.
So Linda, is it critical? Okay, Linda, last one.
Just real quick, I want to note on that accessibility, because this is public too, that we do acknowledge that in different languages, there are sign language in those different languages, so we'll have to make those arrangements.
Boy, well, we can try. That's going to be really difficult. It's difficult to get enough English ESL interpreters now.
ASL. So we'll work on that offline. And so some of the pieces that I heard that we need for the next meeting, the next meeting is April 1st after the business meeting ends. We're hoping that the business meeting will end by 1, so we can have lunch, and we would come back together at 2. So hold on. Yes, Jane?
It's directly on that. We'll know if that is actually going to happen if you guys hear the line drawers on board. There's going to be expanded on the lines, a line presentation, and the chances are, if it's soon, there will be more information on the data management. So I'd suggest come up with an alternative plan just in case.
So we'll get back to you, because we were told that was definite our time. So we'll figure that out and get to you all. And we do have other meetings already scheduled. We couldn't do, I know some of us had talked about the 31st, but that is a public holiday. And so we can't do it that day. And Neil, do you want to go over some of the items that people said that we might need for next meeting or next time?
Right, so we talked about a budget just talking about the budget baseline and what that looks like. Some legal understanding the legalities of what we're required to do in regards to public input and public input meetings. So the list has get more detail on the line drawing contract and what's in the contract. And hopefully we'll have the line drawers in place by then too. One of the things that we had talked about is thinking about best practices for public input in kind of this COVID environment that we're in at this time. And so we have attached, we'll have attached to the notes some of the things that we looked at, Patricia dug it up and I looked at it. So, it's not like I did the work, but she did all the work. So thank her. And we'll continue to look at that. Oh, and then actually up in number 4, Patricia is working on coming up with some best practices too. So there's some videos that we look at, and Patricia is looking at different public bodies and how they're collecting public input, so we can give us some ideas about how we might design these meetings. And then you have Unity map understanding. Did you? Yeah, the Unity. It would be helpful, I think, to maybe invite some of the community groups that are working on the Unity map, just to understand the Unity map and community map, so we understand where they go in the process, and also be able to ask some of the questions that we had about equity and all that directly to them, just so that we can get clarification, because I feel like it's come up a couple of times, and so why not invite them to have the conversation with us? And Linda?
Can I guess I'll just ask this question. Do you plan to address the question that our public commenter Renee Westalesk brought up? She brought it up today, and then she also brought it up at the last meeting that we had as well too. So is that something that would be for the future meeting?
The question regarding education about the COI, about what COI input looks like?
Yeah, what I wrote down is she wanted to know what we're looking for, what kind of information would be appropriate, and what anybody providing public input, what we would be looking for, I guess.
Yes, and that's part of what you know, we found in these videos, Patricia found in these videos is that information. And so we'll bring that back. I mean, so I guess I'll ask Alicia, I guess my kind of vision was maybe we would update the education slide deck with, you know, another slide or so that had the details, more details about what we're looking for in COI input or public input, so that, you know, we have one education presentation, but I don't know if you guys have had a chance to think that through yet or not. So that, I just want to throw that out there.
On that, can I add the COI with the which other committee Ray's on both, was actually charged with bringing that material from the COI back to the commission so we could actually have a look at it, which would facilitate, you know, issues that the public and that we might understand a little bit better with how the public is being confused. So that is going to come back to the full commission, and so from the COI tool group, which Linda's part of.
Trina?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, I love your idea though about including it into the presentations that we have, so that as we're going out, we're sharing with them. So once it comes back, whatever the process is, I like it being in that material. And then since we have the tracking of who we've already presented to, perhaps we could ask staff to pull together a document to send out to teams that we've already presented to, that piece part that says this is an addition or an upgrade to the material that was already provided.
That's a great idea. So Patricia?
I think we just have to do public comment.
Okay. So yeah, and if there are other things that you all think we need to include in our conversation, let us know for next time. So Katie?
In order to maximize transparency and public participation in our process, the Public Input Meetings Design Subcommittee will be taking public comment by phone. To call in, dial the telephone number provided on the live stream feed. It is 877-853-5247. When prompted, enter the meeting ID number provided on the live stream feed. It is 957-7301-9037. When prompted to enter a participant ID, simply press the pound key. Once you have dialed in, you will be placed in a queue. To indicate you wish to comment, please press star 9. This will raise your hand for the moderator. When it is your turn to speak, you will hear a message that says, the host would like you to talk, and to press star 6 to speak. If you would like to give your name, please state and spell it for the record. You are not required to provide your name to give public comment. Please make sure to mute your computer or live stream audio to prevent any feedback or distortion during your call. Once you are waiting in the queue, be alert for when it is your turn to speak, and again, please turn down the live stream volume. And we do not have anybody in the queue at this time.
Okay, I see that it's not quite done on the live stream, so we'll wait for that in a little bit more. So I do want to thank everyone for this time, for meeting at this time. I mean, I think it's helpful for, you know, to meet a little bit later for the public to participate. And so thank the staff and everyone for coming in later.
And the instructions are complete. Sure.
Okay, well, does anyone have anything else to add at this point?
This was fun. Nope.
Well, good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Your comments aren't lost. We will type it all up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good night. Thank you.
Okay, well, there's no one in the queue, so we'll recess the meeting. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.